Right. I thought it'd be fun to, let's see what happens here. Yeah, to talk about performance and benchmarking. A lot of times I get confused, so maybe as we're all around the table, you can unconfuse me. Or if I sit down, is that okay with the camera, or doesn't matter?
Yeah, I can just find you.
I can't see bad Stefan had to leave. He's done some
Yeah, I mean,
But we can blame him still.
yeah.
I mean, we normally do anyway. So.
give him all the action items.
And there's been there's been articles about performance, but there's always been an angle to it. I kind of wanted to tease out what we mean. Yeah. When we talk about I think some people when they think of performance is identifying upper limits. Given an infinite amount of resources or a lot of resources, what are the absolute upper limits of a system? Yeah. Upper limits could be pinned by one network interface or n amount of RAM or CPUs or whatever, or comparisons. In database world, we like benchmarks to say my database is faster than your database, and do we care to say we're faster than wget or Hyper or all that type of stuff? In my mind, that kind of benchmarking is less interesting, I think, because I don't think there's I think in general we're fast, and we know that, and we don't need to have a complicated benchmark saying how much faster we are. The selection criteria for using one thing or the other are sort of different.
I think it's more useful in terms of if one of them is much faster. Why? Can we learn from?
Exactly.
Are they twice as fast?
Yeah.
Why? Then we're doing something wrong.
Yeah,
It's
let's
more
copy
like-
them. Yeah, let's copy whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Figure
yeah,
out.
Yeah.
What.
So with curl, we also have third-party depth comparison. We want to build with different, configurations and see how fast something is. How fast is curl with new TLS versus OpenSSL, or how fast is curl, with the various different backends, right? Or how fast is a curl built with different compilers with different flags, those kind of comparisons. Or protocol specifically, how fast is our HTTP 3 in this version versus the last version? Perimeter flags. It would be interesting to understand performance given a constrained set of inputs to the curl tool or to the options. To me, this is the most important thing. In other words, for me, it would be great to have a baseline from which to measure against. We've got, and that baseline could be every day or it could be every release, to say we haven't regressed in terms of performance in general as like a safety net. And maybe we do have tests like that. That's why I asked the other day about test clutch as an indirect proxy for performance regression. All of a sudden, 80 tests that deal around HTTP 3 are a lot slower. Have we regressed in terms of performance? Yeah.
We would only notice that if it's significant.
Yeah. Right now, and we're not getting the incremental gains like the 1 or 2, 10, 5% improvements either. We're not seeing, and maybe that test loop is happening locally with, maybe Stefan is sitting there running. It's a little bit faster.
I think Stefan is doing that definitely. In particular when he feels a need or he's in that mode or working on those things, that he certainly run a lot of those tests. But then he moves on to do something else, and then it'll just linger there for a long time until something else.
And that context is sort of different every time. Well, he's doing it. How do you, with a performance regression test, it is normalizing a test context for everyone to be able to do it. And that's hard because how do we normalize the network component? How do we normalize this is the normal stuff. How do we normalize storage component, writing stuff? But to me, this is the highest value for us. It would be great to see to make a change in curl or libcurl, run a performance test suite and see if we've gotten slower or faster. I don't know if there's other kinds of tests. Probably is. But to me, out of all those things, the one at the bottom is sort of interesting for me personally, or interesting, I think, the most value, because I think it has a lot of day-to-day, particularly in that every day there's a lot of stuff going in, yeah, and it might take a long time before you notice you've lost 3 or 4 or 5%, and on any one single commit, and then by the time it turns into 10, it might be 3 or 4 unrelated problems. Yeah, it's actually in the project I'm in right now. We really struggle to get to some load performance tests. And what's interesting is you can't include all the tests because some tests are too unstable yet. It's too, there's too much indeterminism to actually get a good signal. So you don't test that yet. The nature of performance regression tests is they have to be stable enough. So if there is a delta, it's explainable and determinate.
Yeah, and we, as Stefan mentioned yesterday, right? We had this regression a while ago, a few years ago, when we suddenly allocated a lot more memory for standard setup, right? And no one noticed. Mm-hmm. I don't think anyone noticed until Stefan just ran. He started, wait a minute. And it was like magnitudes more in that setup. So it was just stupidity, but no one noticed. And it was not it was a performance, but it didn't run slower. It just used a lot more memory.
Memory is kind of the easy one because that's just a number that comes out at the end. That's not dependent on
memory is easy. Yeah,
machine you're running on, or maybe depending on things.
Well, we have a nice thing in Rust where you can pin the memory, and you can always run it at the same amount of memory, and so your upper bounds is always going to be.
Or in a container.
Or in a container, you can constrain it as well.
Yeah, right. But the memory consumption is also related to the performance.
Absolutely.
So it might not be as stable as you might first think.
Right.
Yeah, true.
Because running 50 at the same time is different than 20 at the same time.
But would it be possible to pick out half a dozen specific test cases from the total list of tests that you consider representative, and then?
Yeah, I think definitely. Definitely, I think it's more of the effort has to then be these tests should be run, and we should check the memory consumption and make sure or compare with the.
Can you get the memory consumption numbers out of Valgrind? You're
Yes.
already working with that.
Very massive. You can get even like.
But the problem with Valgrind is that we don't want that because we have. If you do that, you get the TLS inflation. And TLS libraries, they are insane in memory consumption. So we don't want that. So I think it's better that we monitor our own use, and we do that already. So I think that's actually the better way to do it. Because then we have control of every single byte that we allocate.
Yeah, I'm a little bit like to me the first question would be, is this something we might do in the repo or something we do in a different repo? Do we want to overload our existing test suites approach?
It kind of depends on what you're looking at. So the memory one, I don't think it matters so much, because you can easily do it, integrate it in the normal test results, at the end spit out some numbers. And
we have two completely different sets of tests already in the repo, so adding one more doesn't seem like a big problem.
That's true.
And I like having it in the same, so that we're all, we can all run it ourselves. So
sure.
I'll just double check that my changes now didn't mess up everything.
If you're going to measure performance, that's kind of a lot harder. As in you can't assume that your environment is the same as 3 weeks ago.
No.
That's why for regressions between versions or dailies, you would run all the last 10 iterations, the builds, on the same day on the same machine, and you would take the graph from it.
Yeah, or you would just decide on some kind of fixed container. That's the reference one we use, and then we go against that one.
Yeah, but even the hardware might drift. So that's the point of testing different versions.
So before we start drilling into how we might do something, I just have a few other angles here. Yeah. So let's forget about enhancing our test suite. Yeah. Let's say there might be other tools out there. We got simple tools, let's time stuff, time this. I had a talk that the curl-up that didn't happen about using strace, ltrace, mprof. And then there's Hyperfine. I don't know if you guys have ever used Hyperfine, but you know, Hyperfine is quite nice in that you can run things 1,000 times and understand what's going from it. Now this is interesting. Like actually, when I ran this, I'm like, what the hell's going on here? I wrote a little C server, and it runs locally, and I can't explain why the first 100. Like this is independent runs of curl, and the first 100 are behaving differently.
100.
Yeah.
Well, it always runs. It always comes that way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is this curl behavior? What the hell's going on?
Feels like OS.
Yeah, it must be some. And I haven't found out where it is yet.
The server's not written in Java, is it?
No, it's written in C. It's a C. It's just it's the most basic. I mean, I'll show it to you guys. If you can see it.
No, we don't believe you.
Yeah.
Is it multi-process? I mean, probably these days a multi-core CPU. Because
Yeah.
maybe just the OS at some point decided to send client and server to a different CPU, and then that's something like that.
Something like that.
Something like that, maybe.
Yeah, it's running these in parallel all the time, so split.
As I find whatever it is. Gosh. Maybe I put it in a different
Yeah,
folder.
I'm disappointed that you're not using Emacs for this.
Oh, sorry. This is my. I'm not. For display purposes, I don't inflict people because I moved to. It moves to. People have said they're getting sick.
Oh, I understand. Because- And then almost the keyboard.
Yeah, yeah.
You can see what's
I
happening.
mean, this is the. Probably the most basic server you can make, right? There's nothing.
Use V 5.12.
I mean, there's nothing to the C program that would explain that behavior. I don't think.
What comes in, send out response.
But anyways, like this is sort of standoff approach versus the testing or the test suite means it's like a more internal testing. Like we're aware of what we're testing, we're getting involved with it instead of just testing at the end at the interface. That's the sort of decision point. Do it in the repo or not? Okay, let's do it in the repo. Is it going to be like tests or is it going to be this standoff, black box test approach? Don't know. We write a tool that can run these things.
There's this, then you might also want to measure libcurl specifically for some cases and not just.
Sure, I'm seeing curl tool as a proxy to libcurl. Yeah, I'm seeing it as the it's going to pick up all the badness.
Yeah, and you don't actually want to or need to measure two specific things. What you want to see changes.
Yeah.
So
It
doesn't
and
really matter. That's true.
not necessarily absolute, but relative changes on in any context.
And it kind of depends on how easy it is to do everything you want to measure with curl.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it might be
Mostly the parallel things, I guess.
Yeah, so these are all the thing. Yeah, so I asked Test Clutch. So to me, there was some. There. Actually, I should have added the last thing. Should we write a test suite? That's the big question. Can we leverage things that already exist, like existing tests or Test Clutch, or maybe there's people running their own repos that I have no idea about that do performance. But another kind of question, I'd love to see how fast, like the biggest, fastest, most the stripped down performance of curl we could get to. That would be a cool challenge for a nice talk for next year for maybe one of you guys.
Yeah.
To do,
How fast can you?
yeah, how fast can you make it? Make it a challenge, and given, that would be a cool talk, I think.
I think my machine, I'm around 20 gigs per second.
Right, that's good. That's good.
Over HTTP.
With HTTP, yeah, from localhost, but it's limited to the number of cores really, because I need to have the server and curl on different cores.
Yeah, I'm not really. I'd like how fast in a normal, with a network involved and that type of thing.
Yeah, but that's on localhost. So
Yeah.
The other thing you can measure is actually plain raw memory bandwidth test and use that as a comparison, because
Yep.
If you can say, well, we can get 10% of memory bandwidth or whatever the number is, it's probably more meaningful than 20 gigabit.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get that
But
high,
there
and
wasn't
also
20
some
gigabit, it was
confidence
20
makes sense.
gigabyte.
Yeah.
And as soon as you look localhost, maybe zero copy can actually.
It might be nice, like, for example, actually, maybe I'll give you an example of the feel of what happens. Like, what project? Oh, okay, one moment.
And regarding the same RIP or not, I think it depends on how the tests are done. Really. If we
Yeah.
want to do, you know, with these things, we should run them in the cloud with some reference container and everything. Then they should probably be a separate repository.
Yeah, that's what.
But
yeah.
if there's something that is made for everyone to run in the test suite, then it should be. So I think it matters what kind of test we're talking about.
And we already have like the scorecard, right? That I think that did, like that you can like run it runs against Kali and Apache or whatever it is, and it gives you like scores.
Yes, yeah.
So I wonder how it'd probably not be too hard to just like make a wrapper thing that just runs the same scorecard against this commit a month ago, commit
Yes.
3 months ago, and like, it won't be like running it in CI may be a bit more an issue, but just in general, like just documenting this is how you test performance. Like,
Yeah.
So I want to give you an example of what I do every day. So this is a project I work on. It's called Trustify, and every day we have dailies. So you get generated reports, and this is just an application for aggregating SBOMs up. So it gives you, its performance, what URLs happen, requests per second, failures, all nice stuff that you can use, and then it aggregates it all up to something that you can see a delta on. So if you get a plus here, I know things get worse. If I get a negative here, things get better. And this report I can run on the PR. So basically, I probably have something with that has run it, but with bear with me. I'm just going to remind myself where it is. Maybe this one has. So I'll put scale test in here. But anyways, if I want to run the scale test against any particular command, I just would go in here and add it as a comment, and you get a hook to pick that up, and it would run that test. We could run scale test on every PR, yeah. But if you're doing something sensitive that you think you'd want proof of it, then you generate that report. That's the kind of feeling I want with curl, in terms of I'm making a change, and I'd like on a daily basis to know where I'm at. If some amount of changes have resulted in some performance progression, but also on a pure PR thing, I'd like changes. And this runs as a different repo, so I can run it locally before I raise the PR, for forever. And that kind of feeling really works well, I think, in terms of.
Cargo does this, I think. Like with the REST-C, like it also you can like mark stuff as like tests like compares exactly like
Yeah.
you have the like minor and major stuff, and Russell does it too. They like every PR automatically gets like instructions count and like actual clock time. It's kind of cool.
Really good feedback for the individual engineer, especially people who are committing stuff for the first time. They might not have an awareness of the speed aspect, and they don't have any gut instinct of what performance is expected. So the change they're making could be, quite dramatic.
Watching this delta you showed, is this stable? If you run it like 10 times, will you get the same results?
Oh yeah, this is run.
So it's
By
all
the way,
private.
these tests are not just one. These are like thousands of each test, and then
Okay,
the
so it
averages,
doesn't depend on what
Any
the
one, yeah,
actions
yeah.
are.
Yeah, any one of these tests are run many times.
Yeah,
So, and it has a standard amount of standard data sets to it. So. Anyways, that's the kind of feeling that a performance regression test would do. So, probably separate repo. Maybe we can reuse some of the testing stuff we have, but I don't know if anyone has any preference in terms of. Is it black box testing? Completely standing off, or are we going to leverage the our existing test stuff? I don't know. I don't really know what the right answer is. Hyperfine can't do it. I think Hyperfine we could do something with it, and it'd be nice. And but we'd probably have to end up running more Rust code.
So my gut feeling was that the performance is not really that big an issue if you're testing LDAP or Gopher. It's really HTTPS, and that's what we need to test. And in that case, we
that's a good point.
probably want a real server
Yeah.
Because we want to optimize.
Right.
We want the server to be the bottleneck. So in that sense, it doesn't seem to make sense to me to reuse the existing test infrastructure for that.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, you want to run the scorecard that Stefan's made. Basically.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Because it uses
Right.
Nginx and Caddy and Apache.
And you probably want a tool that you can give a bunch of revisions and a bunch of configurations.
Right.
Because you want to run all of those as close to each other as possible to minimize.
I guess a challenge is that you want to build an optimized version when you run performance tests for speed at least.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll have a problem to monitor memory use because that's the optimized one.
Actually, does, given the things Kernel does an optimized build make a lot of difference?
Yes, basically because of the tiny of them, it'll make a difference.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's an important difference.
But if it's running in CI, so like where is it gonna run? Like in GitHub Actions, because it's like
That's what I was asking. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is it'll be a pipeline. It'll be a job running in CI. Yeah, definitely.
because also if we want to go over network, so we need some. I don't know how we can do that.
Yeah, what I've done before is you can actually and then there's another thing where using containers you can set up networks, and you can set up degraded networks as well to simulate bad networks and performance over bad networks. But I don't think that's our first step. I think our first step really is as simple as possible. It may be no network at first, yeah, and do everything on a local something or other. And then we increment to something a bit more.
I know Vessels just has like their own bare metal server, where they just
Yeah. But I think it has to serve a couple of masters. One, everyone can run it locally whilst they're developing. Two, it runs in a pipeline, gives a good signal. What's the third one? 3. There's another, the whole idea with the degraded networks. Is I think it would be nice to use these tests as well because I think differing network conditions have a huge impact on our assumption of performance. HTTP 3 versus HTTP 2, there's worth testing at some point.
It's like that packets in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can do that either by direct intervention on the controller on the network card with
those things.
or you can do it by the container network that you can disturb. You have a constrained, which does a surprisingly good job at emulating bad network.
Actually, if you're going to emulate bad networks, I imagine that could have a performance impact on its own, just in the bad network emulation itself.
It will, because you'll get contention of some sort. You'll get something happening that doesn't happen often. But on average, after running through 100,000 times with this, you'd see those kind of second order problems.
I think primarily depending on what kind of test you do, because I think just to perform downloading stuff, I don't think bad networks will affect performance at all. But if you do something like pausing the transfer in the middle of it and having it, then it could be.
Right.
But the other thing is, you said earlier, Daniel, that you want to measure the kernel memory consumption. But I imagine some use case where you kind of want to see for a similar or the same operation, what the different TLS backends do.
Yeah, that would be relevant. And and sometimes it is relevant to include the TLS too, because you just maybe we did something wrong that made TLS go crazy, right? So it might not be, it could be our fault. So I don't know. There's a mix of different things.
Wait, we don't have this today, right? Do we have anything like this today?
Well, so what we have is we have the scorecard, which then basically it does HTTP transfers multiplex using different servers, different HTTP versions, and different setups and different sizes, different parallelism and everything. So that's pretty good performance. HTTPS performance test suite. So that's what we have sort of when it comes to performance, and Stefan has used that a lot, right?
Is that running on CI at the moment?
No.
Okay.
So all his graphs are made.
Yeah. I think he did a talk on it, didn't he?
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah, so
yeah,
that's an awesome thing, and it's very easy to run. You just have to make sure that you configure the test servers when you run configure.
Right.
And from when it comes to like memory consumption, we don't have anything in the CI either. But so since we have this mem debug setup, which basically is our own sort of simple malloc tracing system, that traces all mallocs we do, so we can easily count. First, make sure that we free all memory that we ever allocate, and we can count stuff like maximum number of bytes allocated and number of allocations done. So that I typically run that myself every few months, just to make sure that how many mallocs are we doing when we download I have this standard script. It downloads a 0.5 gigabyte file, 500 megabytes, right? Because it's big enough so that it shouldn't take more allocations to download more or less. It should be a fixed amount, and it's right now it's 129 allocations. So I know that it's sort of, and because the other day by accident I fell over a blog post I did 8 years ago when I optimized this, and it had exactly 129 allocations.
That's cool.
So 8 years later, the exact same amount of allocations, and actually 17K smaller now than compared to then, as the maximum amount of memory in this sequence. And I mentioned that's what I also was reminded of this TLS thing, because if you run Valgrind instead, and it says how many bytes it allocated, and that's like magnitudes larger when done with the HTTPS, because the TLS backend will allocate a lot of memory, and everything around curl will also allocate a lot of memory. And that might be related or relevant, or it might not be. It depends on. Sure, in many cases we can't really affect that. It's just sort of
depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, and it depends on. And again, I guess it also depends on if it was much smaller yesterday and now it's much bigger, and the only thing that changed was my code, then probably I induced it, even though we don't have it. So it depends on things.
Since we run the same thing, we're like running this different revisions at the same time, so we also ran with the same TLS backend, right? So
yes. Yeah, it really has to be the same version and blah blah blah.
Apples to apples.
Yeah, exactly. Apples to apples. It's really important.
Yeah. So that's at the beginning when you're saying, what are we comparing here? You know what I mean? There could be different versions, but still using all the same, configure. Yeah. So there's a great graph. Of differences we could have here across all these. I think we just start with what Stefan has done and see where we can go.
Yeah. I think the important part is just to start with something. To have that sort of
focus on HTTP, because that's the best. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion topics that people would like to raise?